Hey, folks, and welcome to Elevating Black LGBTQ plus Voices, our event in support and solidarity of Black Lives Matter. Today, we have an amazing lineup of folks from the LGBTQI plus community and folks from the Black community here to talk about their experiences being both LGBTQI plus and Black and those intersecting identities. First off, I want to introduce myself. My name is Sera. I go by she, her pronouns. I'm a proud queer Filipino trans woman. If you folks don't know me by now, I am the Chief Diversity Officer of Silicon Valley Pride. And thank you for taking the time out today on this Self-Care Sunday or Protest Sunday, if you're going to be out there in these streets. Thank you for taking the time out to join us this morning. First off, I want to acknowledge some of the folks that help amplify this message. So thank you to the LGBTQ plus Society of Silicon Valley Capital Club. We greatly appreciate your partnership in amplifying the message and this event out to your group. And also Billy DeFrank Center. Billy DeFrank Center, thank you so much for being such a strong ally to all communities and being that resource for everything LGBTQ plus. And thank you especially for amplifying this event. And folks that are viewing online, if you're using Facebook, you could also make this into a watch party. So if you go to some of the option settings, make sure as long as you can watch this event, that's all we really want. But if you know how to make this into a watch party, so folks within your network could see what's going on and amplify the voices that we have during today's event, be sure to do so by clicking that option. I think it's in the breadcrumbs or the ellipsis menu. Click on watch party and showcase to the world everything that we're doing, and let's amplify these voices. So I want to get started and first bring on the stage Shay Franco-Clausen. Shay Franco-Clausen is an activist. By taking a place at the decision-making table, Shay fulfills her mission to be a voice for those who have lost theirs. She fights to protect women's rights by advocating for policies and changes to benefit the people. Pleasure to have you here today, Shay. Thank you for joining us. Next up, I have Tizom Pope. So Tizom is a fantasy writer, previously a Bay Area resident, but currently based in New York City metro area, where he is working on finishing his first novel. Author of the essay, Black, Gay, and Tired, Tizom expresses the complexities of the human condition in today's world. A self-proclaimed nerd, as am I, he's logged countless hours playing Dungeons and Dragons as his research for his book. Okay, that's not me. Dungeons and Dragons, I'm more Final Fantasy. But welcome to the stage. Thank you. Up next, we have super volunteer for Silicon Valley Pride, Genna Polonia. Genna is a super volunteer for Silicon Valley Pride, community activist, club promoter, and entertainer right here in the South Bay. Thank you for joining us today, Genna.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Shay. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
All right, but that's not it, folks. We have more. So next up, I want to bring to the stage Hank Dean. Hank Dean is the co-president of Rainbow Chambers Silicon Valley. He has spent his time dedicated strengthening his continued education and personal training. If you haven't checked out Hank at Billy DeFrank Center, I think once we open again, we could all join in on his classes if he still continues to have them there. For 38 years of education experience in coaching, his passion began when he fell in love with fitness at the age of 8. After being enrolled into a community gymnastics program and discovering his talent. As he continued to develop his skills, he became even more passionate and began personal training at the age of 14. Hank can build a program for you. His workouts are energetic, versatile, and 100% personalized. I know Hank personally. He does bring the energy. I love being around Hank. So everyone, please welcome Hank Dean.
Hi, guys. Thank you for inviting me.
Hello. And but not least, we have B, Pagels Minor. B, from Mississippi to Chicago to Silicon Valley. B has built their career around building great products for amazing brands while also working to enrich their community around them. B is a native of Mississippi who was relocated to Silicon Valley in 2018 from Chicago. B is also an enthusiast for anything technology related, as well as randomly obscure trivia facts. I love that. B works in technology industry and spends too much time scouring the latest financial footwear and technology news for new tech toys, shoes, and shoes for their collection. Welcome to today's event, B.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, hello. So again, thank you everyone for joining today. We're going to do our very best to make sure that your voices are heard, and we're going to do our very best to make sure that your stories are told and we amplify your voices. So thank you again for joining us today. So let's get right into it. Are you folks ready?
Yes.
So
All right. So this goes to the entire group. With our current cultural climate, Black Lives Matter, everything that's going on. Then we also have shelter in place, and then we have the rollback of trans health protections. There's so much going on within not only the Black communities, but also the queer communities. Our current cultural political climate has was sparked by the outrage against brutality and systematic racism after the deaths of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and Tony McDade. As identifying as both LGBTQ and Black, what are some of the issues what are some of the issues that you folks face with these intersecting identities?
I can get started. I think very specifically, so I identify as trans, non-binary, lesbian, right? And so one of the things I've been having conversations with a lot of my friends and family is the simple fact that, with the rollback of the transgender health laws, I legitimately have friends who are thinking about detransitioning because they're not sure if they are going to be safe when they go to the doctor. And then you add COVID-19, we're also talking about, if we have to go get checked at the hospital right now as a trans person, when typically we wouldn't have this like extra need to go outside of our current care providers to go to the doctor, like what does that look like? And so I think, very specifically at this time with all these things kind of coming together and kind of conflating, there's just this added stress and this added fear of how society will treat us. But then you add on the extra layer of being Black and the fact that Black folks get mistreated going to, medical providers every day. It's just like, what the hell, right? Like there's just this confluence of all these different things that are coming into play that really does make, I think, especially, as a trans, Black person in America, you're afraid all the time, but now it's like, whoa, like I really don't know where I'm going to get a break at.
Right.
Yeah, I think that for me, there's a duality to it. Being Black and being gay, you're in the current climate, you're angry and you're marching for inequality and racial injustice, but at the same time, you're watching your back within the community because of the homophobia that's rampant within that community.
Right.
There's like this juxtaposition of, am I too feminine for this community that I'm fighting for, but also within the gay community, am I too Black for that community?
Right.
I would have to agree. It's really tough when it comes to being also LGBT and Black. I think Will Smith said it best. Like, racism has always existed. It's just being filmed, and so people are now getting a flash into what we experience in our everyday. Sometimes we're, desensitized to it because it is our normal, but then we have the layer of being gay too. It's like, I'm not only sometimes, just nigger, I'm also like dyke gay nigger, I get all sorts of different levels of it. And so and I'm talking about within the LGBT community sometimes where I don't feel safe at all in many spaces. So I think in this current time, we are facing so many different awakenings And it's just time for people to listen and see how racism impacts all Black people and Black trans, queer, because we all have different experiences.
Being, I was born in 1964, and racism has been going on since then and way before then. I've just heard stories from my parents and my grandmothers and aunts and uncles, and it's just really sad to see at this stage of our lives with all this education and things that's going on that we are still in this hole. And it just breaks my heart that we have to be put in this position to be heard. And that's where I'm at on that one.
Can some of you folks share some of your lived experience that maybe non-Black folks, non-queer folks may have never experienced in their lifetime? Any stories to tell or any experiences even before we went to shelter in place and even before Black Lives Matter?
I mean, I specifically remember a time where, picture being in a car with your white friend and being pulled over for a moving violation, but you being pulled out of the car because you fit the description. And your friend being upset that it's happening, but could never understand the anger or the fear like that you feel. I know that just walking down the street, I subconsciously, if I see people walking towards me, will cross the street because their misconception of me could end my life. They're like the bird watcher in Central Park who was just watching birds and pointing out to a woman that she was in the wrong and pointing out posted rules, and she called the cops on them. And those are the kind of things that happen all the time, which is now that, like Shay said, now they're being videotaped.
Right.
And I can say, to piggyback that, is from our lived experience. So I'm actually a formerly incarcerated youth, and I grew up in all the ghettos, what people consider the ghettos. I just think it was communities that didn't have as much opportunities. And I drove a Mustang, and I swear every week my car fit the description. It's 27 times I was pulled out of my car. You keep track and you find inventive ways to get home in your own community. And I was like, really? My car fits the description again? But you have to think about communities of color. No one's telling us, our rights. Should I be asking, am I being detained? What's the reason? Because as you're seeing recently, I mean, we can't even dance and exercise in the street. We can't even sit on our couches and have ice cream. We can't even go out to the club and just enjoy an evening with our friends. It becomes that we're just targeted by racism. And then it's amplified for my Black trans sisters who are being murdered, and people are not having marches for them. No one's upset about it. And I just think that we all have different experiences. I mean, everyone on this panel has a different experience. And me personally, my brother was shot 3 times in the chest by the police for getting in a car accident. Another woman weaponized her white privilege and accused my brother of murder, and he wasn't even there. But it's the injustices that we face. And that's why I'm an advocate, because it's happened so much to my family that when I fight for me, I fight for all. And I just feel that until we address racism, because it's systemic, we said it's systemic. And it impacts us in our work, in our schools, in our communities, and even in the LGBT community. So I think that's the underlying issue that we have to the foundation, is just racism and how people, they play a part in that when they perpetuate the cycle, when they don't stand up when they see someone else. I wish somebody would do something in front of me sometimes. I'm like, so I can give it to them, like, how do I stand up to let people know this is what we should behave when you see it, address it? So.
To piggyback on you. I'm sorry, who's up?
Hank, you can go.
Okay. As Tizom said, being Afro-American and growing up Black, you really have to put a filter on your day. You have to be careful on how much you say to somebody or how you come off to somebody, because that can judge your whole day. And it's really sad being an Afro-American ballet dancer. I've gone to auditions, and just because I'm Afro-American, I haven't gotten, because I didn't speak correctly, or they didn't know that I was Black before I got to the audition. And it just breaks my heart. And it's just, you don't know it until you live it. And I don't know how else to explain it to anyone else. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, the story I'm going to share is kind of hard for me because my family is one of those families, from Mississippi, Tennessee, that believes in this idea of the model minority, right? So, like, the idea being that if we can somehow be perfect, like if we are the smartest we could possibly be, if we always say yes, sir, yes, ma'am, if we do everything perfectly, nothing bad will happen to us. However, when I was 16, I found out that that's not true. So, as a 16-year-old, I was working for my aunt, doing data entry type work on weekends at her company. And the one weekend I was there, a fire started. And, obviously I was freaked out. I left. And then a couple days later, I get called into, police station to get interviewed about what I saw, what I didn't see. And at the end of that interview, I was arrested and I was charged with 3 felony counts of attempted murder, arson, and all these other things. And I was like, holy crap. Like, I'm a National Honor Society person. I play sports. I volunteer in my community. My dad's a minister. My mom's a social worker. Like, I really felt like, I had done everything right. How could someone even possibly believe that I would try to hurt someone, right? And my mom was the one, she was just like, baby, I'd hoped to not have you ever experience this. She's like, but you're Black. They don't have any really good, good potential suspects. You are the Black person, young person in this building. That's why they arrested you. And I was so fortunate because of my mom and my dad's connections. At least I didn't have to spend the entire time up until my trial in jail. I was able to get out. And then the community actually came together and they put together money to pay for my attorney. And I remember my attorney, I was like, oh, this is going to be like, so easy. Like, they're going to try me as like a kid. So maybe, if I do go to jail, I'll only go to juvenile court until I'm like 25. But my attorney is like, no, they're trying you as an adult. And I was like, what? I was like, I don't understand. Like, not only did I not do this, but they're going to try me as an adult. And I remember just like, the fact is that year of going through that trial and everything else, like, I tried to kill myself. I ended up in a mental health institution. And for a decade, I couldn't even tell people that this happened to me, right? And I am this like super bubbly, effervescent person. And it completely shut me down for a decade. And so that's what we're really talking about, is that when systemic racism, it takes your joy, it takes your hope, it takes your future. And that's the thing that we have to fight against. Because when we don't fight against it, like when I think about how folks think about, when Shay says the ghetto, well, ghettos exist because all the hope has been taken from that area, right? It's because they've like literally put their knee and their foot on our necks, and they keep us from breathing and being the people that we're supposed to be. And so that is the problem. That is what we're facing. And that's what we're really angry about.
Thank you for sharing that. I want to make sure that Genna has a little bit. So Genna, if you could hear us, any thoughts on? Perfect.
So, my thoughts on that is just living the life I've lived. I've always called it the triple threat. Me being African American, me portraying this role as a woman, as society would say. And then we have the fact of being gay, on the other side of that, being part of the LGBT community. So I've had discrimination in all ways. I've been to job interviews, and once I get there, I'm going to have it where I'm Black, or that I'm trans as well. So being trans and being Black, I get to interviews, and I'm going to be the last person they hire, for the simple fact that once they figure out that I'm trans and then they don't want a Black person as an establishment, this is definitely what's going to happen. Being in the medical field with people at this establishment would give the same discrimination as far as like not wanting to help me, because they feel that once they find out that wasn't born a female, they don't want to help me regardless of your organ. So these are the things that I face being trans. So I've always wanted to be like an advocate as far as like getting other trans to understand that we're here and we're going to be here for a long time, and it's not hidden. The only thing that I see that now that I'm making America think is now I grew up in the 80s, so we didn't have internet. We didn't have videos where you could watch and see these discrimination.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's surprised. Everyone's surprised at the fact that these things are happening, but they've been going on. It's been going on since I was a child, and it's continued to go on. The only thing we have now is we're publicizing it.
Right.
Yep.
And
Agreed.
Yeah.
I know, Shay, you brought up in terms of like the trans Black women and trans folks supporting the community. And I want to acknowledge some of the protests that are going today nationwide. So today there is the Brooklyn Liberation March for Trans Black Lives that's going on, I think, right now, if we're talking about Eastern Standard Time. So maybe Tizom, if you want to be out on the streets and let us know how that's going, if you're in New York, let us know. And also in LA, there's the All Black Lives Matter protest that's going on later this afternoon. And if you folks want to know what's on the radar for our local community, Silicon Valley Pride is also going to be doing a Black Trans Lives Matter rally very shortly. More information to come. But again, like this intersectionality with not only being trans, but being Black and also being queer, all those things. So I just want to make sure that we acknowledge some of the names that have been, that fell victim to those intersections. So Tony McDade, Nina Pop, Yana Dior. Yana Dior has been brutalized. She wasn't murdered, but she's been brutalized out there in the streets of Minneapolis for being a trans woman, right? Then just recently, around 5 days ago, Dominique Fells and Rhea Milton fell victim to violence against the trans community. So again, I feel that with what we're doing and being able to tell your stories, we're able to maybe shift the mindset of folks to know that these intersecting identities make queer folks, especially Black queer folks, way more marginalized than ever before. So thank you all for sharing that piece of your stories. Does anyone want to talk about Black Trans Lives Matter?
I mean, I'm going to tell you that I think that Black Lives Matter in general, and that's the problem. That should be the narrative, is all of our lives matter. And I mean, as I look at this beautiful panel of Blackness, like I would fight tooth and nail for my other 4 brothers and sisters. Like I would fight tooth and nail. And I think that's the disconnect, is people think it takes away when we say, like, Black Lives Matter, but to me, it includes everyone, and we have to recognize that if something happens to Genna, we should stand up. If something should happen to Tizom, we should stand up. If something should happen to B, we should stand up. If something happens to Hank, we should stand up. It also holds us accountable for making sure that we are also protecting everyone. It is about us coming together. Outside people seeing us in solidarity, but our Black lives, we need to be better about that as well. We need to make sure that we're showing it for all the marches to show up for everyone that's included in that.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I think about when I think about Black trans lives and why they should matter, Black community has rampant toxic masculinity, right? That's also why there's so many issues just generally with the L and the G and the B as well, in addition to the trans community. And so I do think that there needs to be a mirror that we put up in front of the Black community saying, do we want to be these people, right? Do we want to continue to be this community that has this huge problem with femininity and brutalizes femininity in a lot of ways, or any otherness, right? And then it goes back to this idea of, and even when it comes to the larger Black Lives Matter movements, I've had people specifically tell me, well, we don't want to dilute the message by also putting in Black Trans Lives Matter. And I'm just like, well, but if they're killing Black trans folks, they are also killing Black people. So there isn't really a distinction between the two. And I think that there's like a lot of education and a lot of work that needs to be done within the Black community to remember that this is one community. And the fact is that Black trans folks get up and march and fight for Black lives every day. They don't make any distinctions, right? They go out and they are ready to fight for all of us. And we need to do the same for Black trans folks.
I agree completely, because Black trans women in general show up for every marginalized group. Like they are in the women's movement, they're in the Black Lives movement. But where's their protection? Why are we not fighting for them? Why are Rhea and Dominique and Ayana not being talked about or being forgotten when their lives mean just as much as everyone else. If their lives don't matter, then Black lives don't matter. Black lives don't matter until all Black lives matter.
Right. So what are some of the common misconceptions and stereotypes living as Black and living as queer? Having your intersecting identities, what are some of the common misconceptions and stereotypes that folks that are not Black, that folks that are not LGBTQ, that they might not understand about the queer Black identity?
I remember a long time ago, I had a job interview in Greenwich, Connecticut, and it was an online interview. I got the job, and then I went to, do my sign in and everything for the job. And I'm sitting in the lobby, and this young lady says, "I cannot wait to meet Hank Dean. He's got all the qualifications for the job and everything." And I stood up and I said, "Oh, I'm Hank Dean." The words that came out of her mouth directly were, "You didn't sound Black on the phone." My face hit the ground. I didn't know what to do. And I'm like, I'm confused. You threw me off. So just little things that happening my entire life. And I'm sure, Tizom, you have dealt with it also. My family, my brothers and sisters, I've just seen it. It's a nightmare. It's just a nightmare. My poor husband is afraid for me every day that I walk outside of my house, because if someone comes off to me and gives me racism, I'm coming back at you. And my husband is in fear of every day of me being hurt, because I'm a New Yorker and I'm going to let you know that my life matters. So I feel bad. My husband is a white man and I love him to death, and he just fears for my safety every day. And I just hate that he has to go through that. I'm going down with the ship. I don't care.
I think the misconception is, so my name is Shantae Ebony, and through my life, I've used my name on applications and jobs, and I tell you, I don't get selected. I'm more qualified than 90% of the people who apply, and with lived experience. And so I think like in 2011, I work with a lot of youth, and so my students would call me Shay Mamas. And so I started using Shay, and then the phone started ringing. And now everyone knows me as Shay Franco-Clausen, but I'm actually Queen Shantae Ebony. And I've had to dilute that to make them feel comfortable with my Blackness. I actually posted about it this morning. And I think is, when Shantae, they'd be like, "Oh, what's up, Shantae?" and do this like slang. And I'm like, "Good morning." And it they expect me to be okay with the way that they want to treat me and culturize me. And I'm like, it's in everything we do. Even, I ran for office, first openly gay lesbian to ever run for, city council here. And where was the gay community? It was like this, well, do we support or do we not? And I can count on my hands the people who supported me from this community. And I was thinking, is it because I'm Black? Would they have treated me different if I was a white lesbian? And some of the things that I would hear is like, well, you need to turn down your Blackness, or you need to tune, I'm a mother. I've got 5 kids, an amazing wife, and I have this wonderful intersection of who we are. But why can't I just be Shantae and you love me for all the qualities and the gifts that I present or how I show up? It's always about race, no matter which way about it. They find a way to categorize you and put you in that space.
I think to add to that, so I really kind of came of age as a lesbian in Chicago. And it was like so fascinating to me because the Midwest, unlike the South, it kind of has like this underlying racism that in the South, people will just tell you to your face, like, with their Confederate flag, I hate you, which is actually very, very nice because it's very clear. But in the Midwest, you'd be in situations where you'd be around a lot of other LGBTQ folks and they would just, say things. It was like a lot of microaggressions. I remember like my wife and I, when I first introduced her to my friend group, we literally, we were at an event, we were all playing cards, and something came up because there's a lot of cops in this group. Something came up and they were talking about Black people and they were like, well, we're happy that, B's here because, B's one of the good ones. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? I was like, I'm just Black. I don't know. Like, what's a good one? What's a bad one? And then they went
Right.
on to explain. They were like, well, you speak so well, and like you do all these things. And I was just like, oh my gosh. I was like, guys, just so you know, y'all are so freaking racist right now, right? Like, and this is like an LGBTQ community that I'd been a part of for, you know, a decade, and like legitimately, they really did not. They had no idea about how biased they were. And I think they even went to like clubs and bars. Like, you know, recently Grindr, as a part of their like Black Lives Matter support, they've decided they're going to remove race as an option. But the fact is that it doesn't remove the fact that when we are in clubs, when we're in bars, we're in a softball field, when we're out into all those different places, there's a discernible difference in how Black folks are treated in those areas versus how non-Black folks are treated. And so that's something that is pervasive in the LGBTQ community. And it's always been a problem. And it's one of those things that, again, you know, I think it even goes to, you know, like it's a severe othering, right? And the LGBTQ community needs to at some point have like a reckoning about like, why do we have it? Like, again, you know, we said like all Black people, all Black, you know, Black trans lives matter. The same thing for the LGBTQ community, like Black, white, Hispanic, you know, Asian, like everyone that's a part of our beautiful rainbow should matter as well.
Agreed.
Agreed. I think that for me, like Shay was saying with her name, I mean, when you see Tizom Van Cleef on a page, you don't picture blonde hair and blue eyes. So if I'm submitting essays or pieces to publication, there's not even a guarantee that anything's going to be read before I get a generic denial.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's like I know that I can assume that all of us have had that, like B said, the "you speak so well" comment, or I've gotten, "Oh, that was so eloquently written," and I it's confusing because I went to school, I read books. Like, how exactly do you expect me to write or to speak? Like, I'm educated. It's astounding.
Right.
It's just, there's this pervasive stereotype that Black people are just ghetto and uneducated, and people can't get past that for some reason.
Well, and to be clear, it's okay to be ghetto. Like, let's not shame folks who speak differently, who may not speak properly. Like, the point is that we are humans. Yeah, I was like, we are humans. And as long as we're doing what we're supposed to do, people shouldn't be judging us. Like, that's really the point, right? It doesn't really matter if you use big words or small words, if you use hood words or non-hood words. Like, we are humans, right? And when you come into a situation and you put characterizations on a person that is not true, you are doing them wrong. That's really the point there.
True story.
True. Exactly.
There's an interesting word I heard that came up, or phrase called lived experience. Lived experience. I hear that all the time. Then thank you for bringing up those words. Articulate, eloquent. Those are things that can be microaggressions within the community, correct? But lived experience, is that actually a true, is there value to the lived experience, or are just companies or, you know, hiring agencies are just throwing that around as something where we want to be diverse and inclusive, but we really don't, you know, value like lived experience? Can you folks talk a little bit about the words lived experience and if that has any impact in terms of empowering queer Black folks?
Do you mind if I address that?
Sure.
So here in Santa Clara County, they have county commissions and spaces that you can serve on. And a lot of times people don't realize and connect that people that are making decisions usually don't come from all communities. Usually it's the privileged, they have this political network, but when it comes to decision making, they can't solve the problem because none of them have actually lived it. That's why I believe millions of dollars are wasted on ideas they try to implement without having a deeper understanding or a deeper sense of the actual real impact. And I advocated to make sure that every commission had people with lived experience, or you have a bunch of people talking about an idea of something they've never experienced. So the value of having someone with lived experience is because they can actually tell you how to fix it. They can tell you from their personal experience. And I was on a panel about 5 years ago, and it was really big. I was at the Capitol, and I had to present on a panel. I was so nervous because we had a room full of these established, white feminists, and I didn't feel like I belonged there. So I was like, I have to be perfect. But I broke down what I was experiencing in the criminal justice system and how it was impacting, me as a woman, my children, being LGBT. And the keynote speaker got up and said, it's people with lived experience, like what Shay said earlier. If we just gave them the money and the opportunity, they could probably solve all the problems because it's their problem we're trying to fix. They live it. And so I think that's what's important about people with lived experience. They can tell you from the inside of it instead of you trying to come up with ideas of something you've never experienced or have any idea how to fix. Because we think about it all the time. I think about it. I can't even sleep. I wake up like this. I'm like, oh, I have another idea. So, but it's because I'm trying to solve a void that is not being managed. It's not being addressed because those people making the decision, it's not their experience.
Right.
Yeah, I can't, highlight enough how important that is. So one of the things I do outside of work is I'm on the board of Howard Bound Health, which is one of the largest LGBTQ health organizations in the country. And one of the rules that, we have, that because we're governed by this overarching board called NAC, but one of the rules is that you have to have at least 51% patients, right? And so what's really interesting is that this organization, many years ago, they weren't really following that rule. And so the organization wasn't as successful as it could be. But when we really, made sure that we hit that 51% patients, and then after we hit the 51% patients, we looked at our patient profile and we tried to actually set up so that, like, when we recruited board members, we actually fit the patient groups that we were actually treating. This organization has, done, 5-7x growth in the 5 years I've been on the board, because we have people who understand exactly what it means to get healthcare, who care so much about it, and we're able to do so much more. There's something very specifically important to have people who actually have these experiences, be a part of this. Like right now I work for a media company, for instance. And so one of the things that we do is we have different content groups, and, we have a Black content review group, we have a trans content review group, we have just a general LGB, content review group. And we actually look at this content and we say, oh, by the way, this might be problematic. This might be offensive. And because of that, our content is so much better. We are always constantly challenging and allowing, for real experiences. So that the content actually makes sense. And so what we're really saying is that when people who have these experiences are part of these organizations, which is why y'all should really look at our resumes, right? You actually are going to have a better product. You're going to be more successful in what you do as well.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. So I want to share, well, not share, but I want to celebrate this month. This month is Pride. So happy Pride to each and every one of you, first and foremost. And let's not forget that Pride started as a riot. Hey, I see you, Gina. So Pride started as a riot, and it started, fighting against police brutality. So Marsha P. Johnson comes to mind, right? Sylvia Rivera comes to mind. Even still alive, and make sure we give them their roses. Ms. Major is still alive, still like part of this movement. We were the ones, LGBTQ folks, and specifically, Black and brown LGBTQ folks. They were the ones that started this movement against police brutality. Yet here we are today. And again, like last year, I was so surprised that Marsha P. Johnson finally got her roses last year in New York. And it took them 50 years to have a statue commemorating the movement of Black LGBTQ lives that have contributed to LGBTQI plus equity. What is this teaching us? Like, why does history keep repeating itself in terms of still marginalizing Black queer folks?
I can start this one off. I think this is something that we even talked about in our pre-conversation. The fact is that people have to get uncomfortable, right? Like, for the first time in my lifetime, I'm seeing a lot more people who are uncomfortable, just as uncomfortable as I am. Whereas before, it's always kind of been this idea of like, it's happening over there. Like, it's happening over there. I don't have to worry about it. Someone else is going to solve this problem. However, the reality is that it isn't happening over there. It's happening in every single solitary community every day, right? And I think this is the first time that people are kind of waking up to that notion. And this does go back to the technology. I mean, being a technologist, like, I'm super excited about the fact that my industry has helped make it so easy for us to communicate across large swaths of the world what is actually occurring, right? Because when you actually, and something I think is like very fascinating. So I've been rewatching old TV shows, a lot of new, with all the hiatuses, shows that I normally watch went off, earlier than normal. So I started watching old TV shows. And one of the old TV shows I decided to watch was this show called In the Heat of the Night, which came out in the 80s. And it's about, it's about this Black detective from Philadelphia who comes down to Sparta, Mississippi, and he's like changing everything. But what's crazy to me is in the 80s, they were talking about police brutality on this TV show. They were talking about like how crazy it was for Black and white people to date. And I was like, wait, this is 30 years ago. We act like we haven't been having these conversations for 30 years, but we've been having these conversations. They've existed. It's just that people are just like, oh, well, but that's just like 5%. No, it happens every day. So I'm so happy about the fact that this is in people's faces, right? And that doesn't mean that it's gonna be fixed, right? Like, we're not saying that just because people have this information, it's gonna be fixed tomorrow. But for the first time ever, people are actually uncomfortable. And when people are uncomfortable, change happens. And so that's the thing that I'm most excited about, is that discomfort continues and that people rise up and challenge it.
Amen.
Yeah. And I have to say, to piggyback that, is it's not only Pride, but Friday is Juneteenth. And I'm super excited because I started this South Bay Black Coalition for Black parents, Black students, and that intersection, right, of LGBT, to provide a brave space for us to talk about our issues and then tell our allies, here's some tools how you can help us. Because, I mean, we've been feeling it our whole lives. So it's Sunday. But, for someone who doesn't experience it, sometimes we have to hold them accountable to their own actions. And so everyone that's paying attention and watching, I let my kids do it. Let them lead the march. Let them say what they need, because we didn't get to protect the next generation who are now feeling those same microaggressions, the same racism at every place of their life, in school, in their communities, and they identify as LGBT. It's still perpetuating. So I'm glad everyone's feeling uncomfortable. I want them to feel real uncomfortable, because I've been uncomfortable for 45 years. It is about time for your 30 seconds of feeling uncomfortable. I'm not going to apologize for. I'm going to let you sit there. I'm going to sip some tea, and I'm going to let you experience it fully. But we also have to be the ones to say, here, let me give you the resources. Here's movies you can watch. Educate yourself, because I'm quite exhausted. I can't sit on the phone and help people work through their own issues. I'm not going to give anyone a pass. I want to make sure that we say, when all of our Black Lives Matter, is that we're saying, here's the movies. Like, most people didn't know who started the riots and why we have Pride. Thank you, Sera, for bringing that up. Because we're always written out of history, or it's a watered down versions, or they all want us to be MLKs. I'm like, no, he was the most hated man in America and he was assassinated. We still feel that. All the things that have happened to all our Black leaders, our Black community, is a societal issue that we've just been subjected to. We're not the perpetuator. We're subjected to it. Right. So I think it's a space for them to have uncomfortable conversations, even in the LGBT, community, about misogyny, Black hate. It happens to us. And the sooner we have these conversations, thank you, Silicon Valley Pride, for having the courage to let us have this space, the sooner we can make change. But it's not how I operate, it's how they operate.
Yeah, just piggybacking on what Shay said about them erasing us. I mean, they made a whole Stonewall movie and created a white male character to erase Martha P. Brown's contribution. So I didn't watch it, because when I read about that, I couldn't believe it. But it's fascinating. People do have to live in their discomfort at this point. I'm glad that all these allies are coming out, but you have to look at yourself and think, are you an authentic ally or are you a performative ally? Because are you authentically living in your discomfort, educating yourself, experiencing empathy and grief, and using your voice and voting across all levels of government to make sure that we have people in office that aren't actively trying to marginalize our communities? Or are you performative and just posting hashtag BLM for likes on Facebook?
Yeah.
And are you
Bingo.
actually offended by your action, or are you only speaking out because you were called out?
Exactly. That's such a good point. That is such a good point.
You know, we've been getting scrolled by very quickly. And now you're running out of things to scroll through and realizing that we were here the entire time.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and here, you know, that's all I got.
And we have to hold them accountable to those actions. I mean, I've watched the protest and I've seen so many different angles of it. And I'm like, people are pissed off. They're angry. We've had all this anger and nowhere to take it because we have to stop, for me, being the angry Black woman. Anytime that I am passionate or I speak up about something that I'm seeing and how we are not being included in the conversation, then we have this title that we have to be the model minority Black person to make them feel comfortable. But it is really about holding the elected officials accountable. What are we asking them to change?
Right.
We want police to change how they engage with the community. We want, you know, employers to change how they have questions when we're applying. It's a system that we are trying to, at least for me as a mom, I'm trying to build a new system for all the kids that are in my life, and hopefully, you know, making some change for them. But we too have to hold them accountable to the things we want them to do. And you're right, Tizom, we just can't be at a march so we can take the picture. I heard someone say, hey, you want to go check out a protest? What? Do you know what we're writing for? Like, you don't check out a protest. You go to something that's got some action at the end and it's meaningful, or it is just going to be another march. It's going to fizzle off in 2 weeks. And people are going to just have the posts and people are saying, oh, you were there. God bless you for your leadership. No. What have you changed about your actions, non-Black person, to address what we're feeling every day? So action items, we have to hold them accountable. We got to vote. We got to vote in people. We got to help Black people win. I mean, so many things that connect because we're subjected to the rules and we forget who wrote the rules.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Speaking on being comfortable and uncomfortable, I'm going to share with you folks one of my biggest fears in the world. And my biggest fears in the world is police, straight up. And the reason being is just like, they have weapons. I don't. There's never been a positive encounter I've ever had personally with police. Even if I had to ask for support from the police, I feel like I'm questioned. And I have no clue as to, well, I do have a pretty good idea right now, right? But can you folks tell me a little bit about your experiences in the presence of law enforcement?
Oh, boy.
Well, I'm married. I'm married to a police officer. So I'm married to my wife, who is she's a non-Black woman of color, and she is definitely going through some interesting conversations in her own space. And I've actually gotten some attacks from people because I'm married to a cop, as if I went through the academy, as if I go and patrol every day and I wear a badge. I did say I was formerly incarcerated. I've had 27 experience in just one of my cars, but just growing up in the community where they thought all of us were selling drugs. You know, all of us were bad people. We were harassed on a regular, to having 9 brothers and 6 of them being incarcerated and harassed by the police. Now my children are being harassed by the police. I still say that it's a really tough space for me to be in because I still shout Black Lives Matter. And it's got to be tough for her because they're like, you've got this crazy activist wife and you're in law enforcement. But she is someone that is there to be able to say, this is a different experience. This person, you don't know what they're going through today. And she can be that change. But I'm also in fear for her life every single day. Every time she leaves my house, I got to kiss her and hug her and make sure she gets back home because it's a whole police department when they talk about brutality. But you have to think some of those people, like my wife, she's experiencing her own microaggressions from people within the departments. So we don't consider what their experiences are and the bad leadership who doesn't hold the bad officers accountable. It sort of makes every officer a target and also part of the problem. And I mean, trust me, if I could go and face the people who harassed me my whole younger years, I could, but it's how we hire, what we allow them to do. I mean, it's all controlled by the leadership and the city council. That's a really tough conversation that people are willing to have now, changing how they operate in our communities. But even me, I'm nervous when I'm driving in Los Gatos or Saratoga. I try not to go past 10 o'clock, and I make sure I'm like this, my hair's not too wild, and I get pulled over anyways. Her shield doesn't protect me from discrimination and racism. That's within the police department. That's I just want to be very clear.
So the shield is on your car?
I'm sorry?
The shield is on your car?
No, I'm saying I'm not shielded. Like, I don't have a shield of protection because I'm married to a police officer. I still operate in society as Black. And when they see my car, they pull me over, my little cute white Prius. I still get pulled over. And I don't understand. I'm like, but that's what we're subjected to, being Black, driving Black, running Black.
Sleeping in your house Black.
Sitting in your house Black.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like for me, I live in the New York area, so I am walking in the streets a lot. I don't really drive at all, but every time a cop car goes by or there's like a cops in a certain area, like I have the locks, I have the dark skin, and I fit some description. There's always a description, like, and I if you talk to anybody that knows me, I'm the least threatening person around. Although I'm like 6 foot, I'm a bigger guy, and I have locks and dark skin, but that's about it.
Right.
But it's always being aware of like how you're presenting to other people, what you're wearing, trying to present less threatening, although you're not a threatening individual, being aware of your surroundings at all times, because you never know what someone else is thinking.
Yep.
Yeah. And you're beautiful.
It's really funny.
Thank you.
It's really funny. So my wife is white, and it's when we first got together, she lived in like the bad neighborhood, and I lived in the good neighborhood, and I had a really nice car, and so I would drop her off at her house and then drive back to my neighborhood, and I would get stopped like every other day because the police were like, well, the only people with nice cars in this neighborhood are drug dealers. And I was like, okay. And I was like, I understand what you're saying here. I was like, but to clarify, like, you could ask your buddies who pulled me over 2 days ago, because they asked me the same exact thing. Like, I'm literally just driving home. And, with my previous experience with the police, like, I learned very early on that I can't really perform in a way that's going to protect me. And so actually for me, when I get pulled over by the police, I'm like, let's do this. Like, what we gonna do? Like, how y'all gonna act today? Because like, I am legitimately gonna make you feel so ashamed of yourself because I didn't do anything wrong. Like, you're gonna go home and cry in your bed, okay? And that's the only way you can be. Like, but at the same time, that is also a privilege that I have, right? Because I'm a very well-educated, successful Black person, right? I know I got a whole squad of attorneys that I can afford, a whole squad of family and friends who got my back, right? So like, I am very protected in comparison to other Black people too. And so that's also something that I think that we have to also acknowledge, is that there's a big difference, right? Like, living here in California versus if I were at home in Mississippi, I probably wouldn't be nearly as loud, right? Because like, I know in Mississippi, those people, they may not find the body, right? Like, so there's a very big difference, even in terms of this, like, the minutia of living in different areas of this country as well.
To ride off of on B, I got pulled over in my car, and I also have a decent car. And the officer said to me, we have a reporting of cars being stolen in this area. And I politely rolled my window down. I was like, I need you to tell me that my car that I pay for every month was reported stolen. And he did not know what to do from that point on, because I didn't back down. You know what I mean? So he asked me for my ID and everything. And I'm like, yeah, I think you should call your supervisor because you pulled me over for no reason whatsoever. And yep, he was embarrassed and took off.
And you drive a Tesla?
I do.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
which is what I'm like, and it's basically, Tesla's like a Honda Civic here. So like, it's like everyone has a Tesla.
And if I could just say that I did a Zoom with my students from the Brave Space when George Floyd was murdered, and because I needed to, they're watching all these videos. You need to talk to younger people about how they're feeling and where to take that energy. And it was like 50 people on this Zoom meeting, mostly kids. And The shocking part was when they were talking about police brutality. My son, who lives in this house, said, "Oh, I hate the police." And he's like, "I can't stand them. I only love my mom," you know? And then, I mean, it was huge because that's my child. I organized this, and he's saying, and he lives in the home with, you know, police officer. And I called him after, and I was like, "I just want to sort of, you know, talk about what you said." And he's like, "Well, Mom, you and Mom have to sit me down and tell me how to operate in society as a Black man. The minute I leave the door, you guys are texting me. You put a GPS on my phone. You want to make sure I get on the bus. You want to make sure when I get off the bus, I make it to the school. Then when practice is over, text you again." And he's like, "Because you're afraid who I'm going to interact with in that little bit of time frame." And then I was like, good point, you know? And so it was a larger conversation for the group to see how we found out that 10 of our kids had experienced harassment from the police, from Sunnyvale PD, San Jose PD, Santa Clara PD. And now we're documenting those stories, and we're empowering their parents to speak up about their experiences, because they cuffed my son, they cuffed his friends for being at Great America. Something happened and they gathered all the Black kids and cuffed our children for being Black, our children. So, I mean, I think as a mom, and I have 5 kids, 3 are Black, and it's a stress I have every day. So even with law enforcement in our home, we still have to sit our son down and tell him and his friends every time they go out in society as Black, this is how you need to behave. If something happens, lay on the ground. You know, we've talked them through that, you know, how to behave, because I don't want my son to be a Trayvon or an Emmett Till. You know, I don't want him to be Mike Brown. I don't want him to be any of those people. And unfortunately, that's a fear I have every single day.
Just the fact that you have to, every Black family has to have the talk.
Yep.
Everyone, you know it. You know what it is. Everyone does it. It's common. And it's actually more shocking if you haven't had one of those interactions.
Yeah.
Is where we're at.
Yeah. Well, I have one last final question for you all, and thank you for sharing so much perspective. Final question, and I would love for everybody to be able to answer this. What can non-Black LGBTQ plus folks and allies do to be better allies to the communities or to your communities?
I think I get started. This is something that we've. Go ahead, Genna. You go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, you haven't talked as much.
I know, go, Genna. We want to hear from you.
Yes.
Well, what I would say is basically, I mean, anyone that's going to be that's non-Black or anything LGBT. I mean, what I would say is I see a lot of discrimination as far as like that are non. Just for the simple fact that when they see anyone that's Black or anything, they want to point out race, and they want to point out that someone's what their sexual preference is. So I just feel that we just need to educate whoever you're around, or when you hear things, you should say things. Just like we were saying earlier, you guys were saying earlier, as far as making people uncomfortable. If we continue to like make people uncomfortable, shouting out, saying things instead of opposing, saying, oh, you know, or wanting to not be portrayed as this loud Black person or this loud Hispanic or loud person, then, you know, instead of like the next gay person standing next to your, or that's part of your family, not saying anything because they're afraid of like not helping. I think that's where it starts at. Is with yourself and making sure all your friends and family around knows.
Yeah, I think adding to that, I think elevating the voices of Black folks, LGBTQ plus folks, trans folks, that's very important. So like when folks are sharing different posts, I actually had a couple friends who are white, and they were sharing other white people's posts. And I was like, well, what does that do? Like, you should be sharing the posts of the people who are actually doing this work, because the way that we're telling this is much different and much better than the folks who are trying to like DEI this, right? Like that's just their jobs. That's not actually their actual experience. And then secondly is put your money where your mouth is. If you really are passionate about these topics, there's so many organizations out there who are doing this work, who are doing it at a very high level, very sophisticated, and they need your support. So economic support is going to be a game changer. You know, when we think about the number of nonprofits that exist and how the funds flow in, you know, like it's something like less than 5% of any funding goes to like Black and then Black LGBTQ causes and things like that. And so like we need to, you know, provide economic empowerment. And then just generally going back to what Genna said, this is something we've said throughout this entire thing. Make yourself uncomfortable. Do something every single day that makes you uncomfortable. Maybe that's reading a book that makes you uncomfortable. Maybe that's looking at posts that make you uncomfortable, looking at videos, you know, confronting your boss, your manager. Do something that makes you uncomfortable, because if you're doing that, that's the friction you need to become the person that you really can be at the end of all of this.
Yeah, you need to educate yourself, live in your discomfort, and stop calling people your Black friend or your Black friend or your gay friend. Can I just be your friend?
Yeah.
Like B was saying, there are organizations, there are victim memorial organizations, there are community outreach organizations, there are police brutality organizations. Go do your own research. It's exhausting for us to try to explain things to you.
It's not our job. It's not my job to educate you, period. Read a book. Leave me alone. You know, if I get one more email from someone that says, "Are you okay? Why? What happened?" Like, wow, I haven't heard from you in 20 years. Are you asking me if I'm okay? Wow. Interesting.
So I would say that I think of it just differently. I think maybe I'm the only mom here. I'm thinking about, I want non-Black people and allies to stop telling our stories and posting as if you understand our experiences or speaking on behalf of us. I was watching a lot of videos of rallies where they were just reciting what we experience. We live it. We know it. We need you to be addressing your people. Like, here's your actions you need to change. Because this cycle perpetuates by other people's behavior. Like I said, we are just subjected to it. So I would say that look at your hiring practices and your job, making sure that your schools have, you know, equity in their hiring process for Black teachers, Black counselors, and having support system for students in every K through 12 and college campus. Try to help us build Black excellence. I think B said earlier is like invest in programs that are giving scholarship for Black students, because that's what's going to get us to the next level. I think they said it's like kindergarten to prison if they don't have the resources that they need. And as a mom who works with a ton of youth, I'm telling you now, just try to help us make it different for them by giving them opportunities within every part of society. So we don't have to have this conversation on Pride Month next year or the year after because I'm simply exhausted. But I will say I do appreciate, because I know a lot of my friends are watching, my white allies who have called me and they felt brave enough and safe enough to ask me some questions that it's not their lived experience. And those people, I'm not talking about them. I love to give them a perspective, but I think it's you having those conversations with your friend groups and your kid group. And why don't you have some Black friends outside of me? Why don't your kids have Black friends so they can understand Black culture? I don't expect someone to understand our issues if they have no Black people in their community. And the last thing is, I met this woman about 6 months ago, and she told me I was her first Black friend. She has to be older than me. And I was like, well, I'm glad it was me, because then I'm able to give her the space to, I like her a lot. I care about her. So I give her an opportunity to understand from my lived experience, even when she questioned it, because that's what they question us all the time, right? Well, I want to know, because they're looking for a pass. I'm like, I'm telling you how I feel. Now you need to take this and internalize it and change your actions. And that will change how things happen for us in society.
Yes.
Thank you. And thank you all for sharing your perspectives. Big round of applause. I know folks, our guests cannot see your virtual applause, but you could see my applause. So thank you, B. Thank you, Shay. Thank you, Tizom. Thank you, Genna. And thank you, Hank. We greatly appreciate it. On the behalf of Silicon Valley Pride, we want to thank you for taking this time out. I don't know if you folks are doing a little bit of self-care or if you're going to be out there to do some activism, but whatever you do, be safe, be out there, be like we want to make sure that we elevate the voices here. Folks online, thank you for joining us today. Silicon Valley Pride will be posting all the social media handles of everyone here. Make sure you follow them. These are the people that will help lead this revolution. And make sure you educate yourself on how to be a better ally. You have tips, you have tricks, you have suggestions, considerations that you could follow from this amazing group of people. And make sure to check out some of the other events that we have. So one thing that we will be doing, and this is in consideration for the folks that we have here, we'll be doing an all Black Lives Matter protest this Wednesday at Belita Frank Center, 6 o'clock.
Okay.
So if you are interested and if you are okay to be physically out there, I know I am so tempted to hug each and every one of you when I'm there, but we must maintain social distancing and we
Air
must
hug.
make sure, air hug, the elbow thing, like whatever we have to do. But we want to make sure that we continue to elevate the voices of Black, queer, LGBTQ+, trans, the entire spectrum, the most marginalized communities in the spaces that we can create. So best believe Silicon Valley Pride, as well as the entire LGBTQ community, we are looking to you for guidance. And please make sure to let us know all the amazing work that you folks do so we can continue to amplify that. But happy Pride, y'all. Happy Sunday. Take care. Juneteenth is around the corner this Friday. So let's celebrate. Let's go big. Let's challenge Salty. And thank you, Salty, for working on the back end and doing all this
Yes,
technological
thank you.
stuff. Maybe we could think about doing something for Juneteenth. We'll see. But let's go big and happy Pride. And let's continue this fight together, united. We'll never be divided. Thank
That's
you
right.
all.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone.